And when I talk about organizational health, you have to look at a business in two ways. You have what I call the smart and the healthy elements of the business. Smart parts are all the things that you typically think about. It's the hardcore, the products, the nuts and the bolts of how you do business. Then there's what I call the healthy side of the business. And that's the whole element that deals with the organization, the culture, and you have really high productivity because everybody knows where they need to go. It is those elements of culture, but it's more than that.
Welcome to the Cultivating Leaders Podcast, where we get inside the minds of leaders to harvest great ideas and lessons that help you grow as a difference maker in food and agriculture. I'm your host and curiosity captain, Nicole Ursig. I am so excited for today's guest, friends. She is a powerhouse full of energy and great ideas. She's a strategic mastermind when it comes to organizational health and investing in people. Jackie Applegate is the COO, soon to be CEO as of November 1st, at PBI Gordon, a company dedicated to providing innovative solutions in the professional turf and ornamental industry and the animal pharmaceutical industry. Prior to her current position, Jackie spent 30 years at Bayer Crop Science, starting her career as the only female chemist, all the way to serving as the president of Bayer Crop Science for North America. Jackie is widely recognized for her ability to build healthy, high-performing teams by aligning culture, people, and strategy. Jackie, welcome to the pod. What did I miss from your bio?
Well, I grew up in a really small town in Union, Ohio, surrounded by corn and soy. And I've always had a passion overall for the agricultural industry. I've got a lot of personal friends who are in farming. I think it's something that's near and dear to my heart. And my family still lives in that very rural town now of a whopping 7,000 people. And yeah, so that's about it.
I did not know you were from Ohio. I live in Ohio.
Oh, okay, Nicole. That's good to know. You have to tell me where later.
Okay, Jackie. So I want to start a little bit with your career journey just because I am curious. How does someone start out as a true chemist, scientist, and get to where you are today?
Yeah. No, it's a great question. As a kid growing up, I always had a passion for science and things like that. And I went on to get my degree in chemistry and biology. And then I moved on to get my PhD in organic chemistry. And it's kind of interesting because my career, I started out working in the manufacturing side at Bayer. So when I first started in Kansas City and Bayer, I was working more on the manufacturing side of the company where I was using all the science and the chemistry. I worked in process development. I worked on new ways to develop products. But about 4 years in, I asked the question to the company. I said, look, I want to do more than just be a chemist because I figured out we were a business and I was developing products for the agricultural sector. But as you start out in your career, one of the most important things you do in your career is you network and you meet people and you learn how the business runs. And I figured out that I was working in one small sliver of an overall really global business. And there are so many decisions that go in to driving how you're going to get something from basic research where a chemist developed it and a biologist looked at the efficacy all the way to a global market launch with global penetration. And so I asked, well, I want a job like that where I can learn about how these things work. And that started my international career in Bayer. And then I went into global project management where I actually developed, took things from research and I did all the marketing to help the team develop the regulatory dossier. And then actually also looked at the market penetration of the molecules I was working on. And that whole experience was probably one of the most valuable experiences of my life because it became a multicultural, multi-geographic role where I worked with people throughout the world. And that led me then, I'm always one of these persons that's like, what's next? And it led me to basically then starting to develop businesses. And one of the best career advice that I can give to people here is that when you're in a position is be asking yourself, where am I going in the next 3 to 5 years? And I would also advise to have what I called the professional side and the personal side, because when you're younger in life, you're developing just not your professional career, but you're following your what you want to do with your life. If you've met a life partner, you want to get married, you want to have children, where you want to live, what are your interests. So doing that whole kind of career projection and finding, and then if you have a life partner or you're married, finding where they want to go, because then that allows you to develop overall your career. And I was very blessed that I had a partner that was also interested in moving abroad and doing different things. And that's how I began to work in the business side. So I went into the consumer based business, which was the Bear Advanced over the counter business. And then from doing consumer, which is a whole different world of doing business, you're working with retail, it's about shelf space. You're working with really big businesses with the likes of Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, but then you're blessed to work with the independent retail garden center and the cooperatives like Ace, True Value. So I started out leading my first business in 2007 in that arena. And then I went into the B2B, the professional business, which was turf and ornamental, global pest management, also vector control and things like that. And then I also jumped in and then went back into the agricultural space. And my first job actually leading an agriculture business was in Australia and New Zealand, which was quite interesting. So the chance to learn different markets, work with different farmers around the world. And that was kind of how I got into the business side. So that's really kind of how I went from the science to the business side in the industry. And then in Bayer, I was very blessed because I bounced back in between the non-crop side of the business, which is a T&O public health side. Also worked, as I said, in the consumer side. And then I also went in and out of the ag side. And then I worked in the global vegetable seeds business, worked a lot in horticulture. So I just had a very rich career over 32 years where I was able to move up and take different size businesses. And then in the end, when I retired from Bayer, I was managing Bayer's largest business in the world, which is a North American crop science business, which, is, crop protection chemicals, is also the seed business, and then is also our AI business with Climate Field View. So we were selling all of those inputs to farmers.
That's amazing. So you said retired and then you couldn't stay out of the game, could you? You came back.
Well, I'll be really honest with y'all. I thought I was going to retire, and I really liked. I mean, it's funny. Like when you work really hard your whole life and you go really, really fast and you're very busy. And I took off about 4 months. And I have to say that I did all kinds of crazy things. Like I redid my mother's garden and I was doing so much stuff because I was just used to being busy and not just traveling, but when you have a job, you're mentally busy and you're interacting with people. And my husband had passed away some years earlier, over 10 years plus ago. I was on my own and my son's in college. And as my son said, "Mom, you're calling me a lot." He's like, "I'm doing really well. I'm good. I hadn't heard from you a lot. I'd talk to you once a week." I'd be like, "Hey, how's your day been?" My parents were like, "You need to find something to do." And I was only 58 and I actually chose to retire. And I was being contacted by many people in the industry and was looking at different opportunities. And then I got a call from Don Chu, who is the chairman of PBI Gordon. He asked me to come for lunch. And I have to say it was interesting because PBI Gordon is an employee owned company. I had always worked in a very large publicly traded company. And, it's a very different company in the sense that it is 100% employee owned. So we're having an impact every day. Also, at that time, we had about 500, let's say maybe 20 people in the company overall. And he said, "Look, I'm looking for a COO." He says, "And I need somebody that knows the industry well. We're both in turf and ornamental and animal health, chronic niche pharmaceutical, and also we do nutritional supplements on the OTC." So once again, that consumer based, over the counter. We're in the Pet Smarts, the Petcos, the Walmarts, Tractor Supply. Um, and then at the same time, the turf and ornamental business, which is, the standard non-crop business I've known my whole life. And then to walk into the animal health chronic niche, we do urinary incontinence. We also do anxiety. We created those categories in the pet animal health space. And now we just have made an acquisition, which is one of the reasons that Don hired me, was to grow the business. So we had acquired now Trivium Vet, and we just launched out of their portfolio Felison CA1, which is a very unique and the first of its kind product to treat hypercardiomyopathy in cats. And we have a whole pipeline there. So Don asked me, would you be interested to come in, help us grow the business? And it was employee owned. Being a small company, they really care about their employees and their families. And it was something that was so different. And I thought, you know what? One of the most favorite things I did in Bear was when I ran some of Bear's smallest businesses. There's a uniqueness to how you bring the team together and how you drive and grow the business. And it's just a lot of fun to work in a smaller organization. And when I retired from Bear, I had 11,000 employees, 100 plants under, people that reported to me. So, I went from something really, really large to something that is just really small. And you can see the impact you're having every day on how you touch the people, how you touch our customers, and the unique differentiated innovation that we're bringing to the market. And it's a fully integrated business. So all of the businesses have R&D all the way through manufacturing. We also are a contract manufacturer for the industries that we play in. So it's a fully integrated business. So you get to also touch all aspects of the company. So that's how I got to PBI Corp, and I've been here, and I'll be the CEO effective on the 1st of November. So they asked me a couple months ago if I was interested in being the CEO. So I've got big shoes to fill. Steve Clifford will be retiring at the end of October, and he is doubled the size of the business, added 50% more people, and has grown the business and built a really solid foundation that I'll be able to build on. And I already contributed in the 14 months I'm here, leading the acquisition. I drove the overall strategic reviews for all the businesses of where we wanted to go and where we want to grow. So it's really, really exciting to have this opportunity.
It sounds exciting. I think that is not the conventional person's retirement plan, but it seems very fitting of you and your personality. Based on what you shared about your career, I think for me, there's so many questions that come to mind of things that I know our listeners can learn from you. But let's start with organizational health. And as someone who has led big teams, small teams at that high macro level, lots of leaders talk about culture, but I think organizational health probably goes beyond that. How would you define organizational health?
Yeah, organizational health is really essential to drive culture and to drive business. And when I talk about organizational health, you have to look at a business in two ways. You have what I call the smart and the healthy elements of the business. Smart parts are all the things that you typically think about. It's the strategy, it's the marketing, it's the finance, it's the technology. It's the hardcore, the products, the nuts and the bolts of how you do business. That's the smart part of the organization. It's those technical competencies that you want in people that are going to drive the success of the business. Then there's what I call the healthy side of the business. And that's the whole element that deals with the organization, the culture. You want to drive an organization where you got minimum politics, clarity, no confusion. You drive really high morale, high performance, and you have really high productivity because everybody knows where they need to go. And it's also a key element of your overall attraction of talent, your retention of talent. And so it is those elements of culture, but it's more than that, because often in culture, people just focus on, they have all the buzzwords. about this is what we stand for. It's about integrity or whatever. And the values on the wall where people walk by and they read them. But this is really about getting to the heart of laying out the clear expectations. And I'm telling you, the healthy part, if you think about the time in organizations you spend, leaders get very caught up in the smart part.
Oh, yeah. That's what the business metrics are typically based around, right?
And all your business metrics, so your key performance indicators, your goals that you set, all the things is about measuring all the smart parts. But what you really got to be also good about is also driving the organizational cultural health elements that I talked about. And I can talk in more detail. We can talk a little bit about how more you get into that. But you really need to spend the proportion of your time on the healthy side. And I always say that if you get the people part right, the foundation of laying out the vision, the purpose, you bring clarity, bring the focus, clear of expectations of how you want people to show up. um if you get that how right in the people, the what, the smart part will come. It will come. And that's one of the things that I've always done in my career, is really focus on the healthy side of the organization. Now, when you're a new leader, that's something that you probably have less experience in.
Yeah, or even, like, you may not feel like you have control over, right? Like, if you're a middle manager listening, Jackie, like, how can I contribute? Yeah.
Right. And you could ask yourself, how do I contribute? Absolutely. And when you're a young leader, you're understanding who you are as a leader. And that is so important. So, where I've gotten to as a business leader, that was also an evolutionary journey of who Jackie is, building my own self-awareness about who I am as a leader, what drives me, what do I value. And that kind of self-awareness doesn't stop. It's a continuous learning journey throughout your entire career. But you get to a point when you become a leader of people and you're driving an organization, you will begin to realize that also you have an impact as a leader in how you show up, and what you set drives and influences the entire company.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Jackie, I'm sure you had to learn some of these lessons the hard way. Are there any, I'm going to say, horror stories, or hey, here's a painful thing that I had to experience to learn a lesson that maybe you could teach our listeners of, here's what maybe not to do, and here's how I learned that when it comes to organizational health.
It's very interesting that when I first came into my first job of leading a business, so I showed up in August, and I'm really excited. I got to move back to the States, and I had been out 10 plus years. I had a young son, I was married, very happy, and we were coming back to the US. We were going to be close to family and friends again. And we moved to a really cool place in, the Carolinas. So we didn't go back to Kansas City. We went to the East Coast because we had bought some years before Vintage Crop Science. And so we had shifted our headquarters from the Midwest to the Northeast corridor where the chemical corridor sits today. And really excited. And my son was starting kindergarten. And, that's like an exciting time in your life. And I remember going to work and, meeting the team and talking to people. And the business was kind of in the red. I mean, we were growing and doing well, but we really weren't making the money we should be making for where we're in the business. So I felt like I was under a lot of pressure. And you start working with your team. And I really started to realize that there was maybe a little bit of dysfunction amongst the team. And one day, after I'd been there probably about, 4 weeks or so, my head of sales comes in and says, I really hate to do this to you. You seem like a nice lady. When someone starts out and me and says, you seem like you're a nice lady. And you're like, I think I am, and it goes, but here's my letter of resignation. And I'm like, what? What do you mean letter? Yeah, you know what? Yeah, things haven't been going well. And I started talking to Syngenta and, yeah, I'm like, I'm leaving. And I'm like, oh, okay. And then 2 days later, the head of sales quits. Another regional head quits. And I'm thinking, hello, people. It's like September. We got to close out year end. This is like, you got to close the business. We're in trouble. It was just chaos. And overnight, I became the head of sales. And actually, I had never led a sale. I mean, I never like did sales. I mean, ladies, I started out as a scientist. I never, like you'll meet a CEO and they'll say, yeah, I started out, and I was an entry level sales manager. Then I went, you know, and I'm like, and that's not her. I'm like, I started out in laboratory, and next thing you know, I'm the head of sales. Another regional manager quits, and I am thinking, what is going on? And I had another leader in the team quit, and I sit everybody down, and I'm like, what the heck? What is going on here, people? Like, is it me? And and they said, well, some of the people said, you're like super high energy. And you're like talking to everybody about what we're going to do and how we're going to get it done. And they said, you know what? It was just like, you can actually be a little bit overwhelming, because you're just, wow. And I am a ball of energy. I'm not, hey, look, I'm not changed. I'm a ball of energy.
Yeah, you are. I enjoy it, Jackie.
but I was like, oh, and it's like, it was a little intimidating. And people's, so somebody was already going to leave. And then somebody's like, I don't know, man, this lady's got really high expectations. She's talking about, we're going to grow and go here. And I was like, well, okay. And I said, okay, we got to get through this. I said, you've given me, and I'm going to say something. Feedback is a gift. And that's what I want to talk to you about feedback. You can choose to do something with it, or you don't have to do anything with it. So that's what I always tell people. Feedback is a gift. When someone has the courage to give you feedback, you better self-reflect a bit, reflect maybe on the situation. And I reflected on it and I thought, okay, I had to hit the ground running. Okay. So I'm going to start this journey with my team, with my leadership team. So I really started working immediately on building a cohesive leadership team. And we can talk a little bit through that. But that feedback, so I mean, was it a horror story? I think it was a great lesson learned. I took that I lost some people. I wouldn't say that I'm taking 100% credit for pushing people out because I do think there was dysfunction also going on before I arrived, most definitely, because the head of sales had already, before I even got there, was leaving. And that's why I was brought in, was to bring in a new leadership, new culture, work on the organization, take it out of the red into the black. At the same time, it was my first job running a business, right? So I took the feedback and I began working with the team, and I started reading a lot about organizational health, what we were doing. I don't know if you, Table Group, Patrick Lincioni. Yeah, Lincioni was also working with Bear at that time. That was when his book, Five Dysfunctions of the Team, came out and things like that. So I started my journey with my team with the five dysfunctions. And if you think about, where he went from the five dysfunctions, talking about anonymity of employees, and you talk about where they are today with the advantage, which really talks about organizational health. I've been very blessed in my career to work with a lot of different organizations, but the Table Group has definitely had a influence on me. And the first element was I worked on my team, which was the five dysfunctions of a team. And we figured out where we had some dysfunction and we moved forward from there.
Such a good book. If you're a listener and you know me, I believe leaders are readers and I love books. But if you haven't read Five Dysfunctions of a Team, it's interesting. It's a fable, so it reads like a story. It's a very good one to read. It's also sometimes painful because I don't know about you, Jackie. I know when I read it for the first time, I was like, oh, I can see myself in some of these people at the table, and I don't necessarily love that. So to that point, leading organizational change or trying to grow, it affects a lot more people than that leadership team at the top, obviously, right? So, what would you say to someone who is maybe experiencing organizational change, trying to do big things, but they're not in the room where those decisions are being made and those things are happening? Because I think that leads to a lot of like pushback on the change that's happening. So, I'm curious what you would say to someone who's maybe not in the room or hasn't been in the room where those conversations are had.
Yeah, that's a great question. Actually, if you're doing it right, it shouldn't be an issue. And we can talk about how to do it right a bit in a little bit. But what I will share is the following. I think that one, it goes back to understanding who you are and your own self awareness. There's something which is called the Bridges transition model. And I don't know if you've ever heard about this. If you're out there and you've never, as leaders, read about Bridges transition model also talks a lot about how you manage transition and how people go through transition. There's people out there that, like, when you talk about change and the leaders and people start talking about what the difference are, and it's like this, they're like going, whoa, you know, they're like, kind of like where I'm at. It's warm, it's fuzzy, I'm good.
And sometimes they're not even like, whoa, they're like, no.
Well, it can be a no,
Yeah.
absolutely. But, like, let's just say they're hearing it and they're going, whoa, I'm not sure. Like you said, they dig their heels in and they're not going to go on the journey. There's others that go, okay, listen to you, hear you, maybe going to meet you halfway. And then there's people that are like, whoa, change. Let's go. Let's go. I like change. I'm a go with the flow person. So if you tell me, we're going to do something, I'm thinking about, okay, how am I going to get there? What am I going to do? So what I would say to the individual is, when an organization is going through things, ask yourself, how am I going to show up? Make a conscious decision to be part of the positive. And if you can engage and look, change, look, no matter, even if you're like, woo, I like change, there's going to be things you hear that you're going to self-reflect. But if you can find ways to engage and be part of the movement, the part to do something different, you will find that it's a much better experience. And be open to learning. Ask questions when when you have concerns, in a constructive way, point that out. It'll be a much better experience for you. Often those that dig in, they become what I call the energy vampires. I don't know if you've read of any John Gordon's books, right? And John Gordon talks about, like, when you're on a school bus, right? And there's people that sit in the front of the bus and they're like, woo, let's go. And there's the people that are energy vampires, that are like sitting towards the back of the bus and they're always saying the negative things and they're always talking about stuff. And there comes a time where you're going to say to them and give them a hard look and say, are you with us? Are you on our bus? And are you going to go on this journey? If not, I'm opening up the back door and you need to step off the bus, right? That is also okay if you are an individual and you choose to step off that bus, but you need to, because maybe there's a place that's better for you. And I've always said that in change, if when I've had people or I've sat down people and I've said, you know what, I don't think this is going very well. You're not really happy. You're not buying in. How can I help you get somewhere else where you're going to be happy? So I think that, for, going back to your point about who you're not, the people in the room, maybe middle management, C-suite, whatever, is what do you do? It's really about being open to engaging, to learning, but asking the right questions. But you have to, as an individual, decide, am I in here for the long haul and I'm going to go on the journey, or I need to step away? Both can be right. It's about the individual. But that goes back to knowing yourself and what do you value.
Yeah. Jackie, I'm curious for someone who might be in that position, and especially maybe someone who hasn't engaged with executives that much. You talked about if you have concerns, bring them up in a constructive way. If if I'm on your team, Jackie, and I don't like maybe a change you're making, or I feel like, hey, that we're going in a wrong direction, what's the best way for a talented person on your team to come and share feedback, but in a constructive way?
Right. Well, in my organizations, I always hold, one, we do one-on-one and we do step meetings. So you go down a level. One, they have their boss. So talk to your boss. If your boss doesn't have the right answers, ask your boss or go to your boss's boss. I mean, look, okay. And I'm going to say this too. I am not very hierarchical. I talk to anybody. I mean, I'm all about my people. I mean, I like to talk to everybody. I want to know what's going on, right? So I'm very approachable. Not all leaders are approachable. So you got to kind of understand the world you're in and the avenues of how your organization runs. But I would say ask intelligent questions. I'm going to tell you another thing that's a really good thing today. I mean, this is what I think is, a lot of times today when people do town halls, you have teams, right? And you have the chat function, right? Now, some companies don't make chat anonymous. Other companies do make chat anonymous. But I mean, honestly, chat is like the best invention for those people that don't want to stand up in a room or stand up and go, woo, like, hey, I got a question and I'm going to talk in front of the whole company. I mean, there's people out there that don't want to do that. So, so today you have technology. So you can ask in a meeting, you can raise your hand and step up. And I always tell people, and this is something I'm going to share with y'all. If you have this question in your head, there's probably at least 20 to 25% of the people that have the same question. So when you ask that question, there's going to be about 25% of the room going to go April. Boy, she just asked that question. Well done, right? I mean, and you might actually, by speaking up, identify people with a like mind in the sense that, well, maybe walk up to you and say, hey, I really appreciate you thought about this. And then you're creating a network where you can be talking together, working out. So being willing to step up, but at the same time, we've got email today. People send me emails all the time, and I'm the COO. Let's say, hey, Jackie. And people did that all the time. Reaching out is another way. And I think if you're a really good leader, you're going to take that seriously. That somebody has taken the effort to reach out and talk to you is important. So there's so many avenues. Your own line of leadership, um, departments normally have meetings, you have town hall meetings, and then today you have technology like you wouldn't believe to reach out and to share your thoughts and opinion. I mean, look, I was saying to somebody the other day, I started out in business where I was writing slides on acetates with a pen, and we did carbon copies when we took messages. And I remember when we got email and everything was done via letter. So business moved at a pace that was slower, right? And today everything's instantaneous. So that's what I would say to people is, is step up, share your thoughts. Because if you're not having those open conversations in an organization, that helps leadership, brings to them clarity of what they're not doing well or what points they're not getting across. And all good leaders want to be able, if they're driving an overall change in agenda, they're going to want that feedback. Remember I said feedback's a gift.
Thank you so much for that, Jackie. I think that provides a good example. And what I hear you saying too is encouraging people to use their voices and speak up. I think a lot of times when you don't, especially when you initially have that question, it can start to fester and build and build. And that starts to erode organizational health, especially if you're in that energy vampire group, whether you want to be or know you are or not. I think those people can be helpful of identifying, obstacles or challenges that this change is going to provide or that kind of thing. So I think being able to speak up and doing so respectfully, no matter what avenue you choose, can actually help the organization. You said we could talk about this. So I want to know, how do you lead organizational change effectively? Like, what's a good blueprint of what it looks like done well?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I will tell you is it starts with building cohesive teams at all leadership levels. One of the things that I've discovered in organizational health, and I really want to stress this is that usually you can get the top layer of leadership cohesively going, often even in change people below, but sometimes middle management, and I call it the clay layer. And why I say that's clay, because it's kind of like soil and water doesn't move as fast through clay. That's why I call it the clay layer. Because once again, as you're driving change, it's about cascading and information flow. So the first thing is that with the leadership team at the very top, and the level below, which I consider to be like your leadership community, I drive an environment where you have your overall leadership, and then you have that whole next layer of leaders below, which I call my leadership community. And what you need to do is develop an environment of what I call building trust or psychological safety. So you're creating that environment where people are going to be open, share their perspectives, and give opinions. You're really going to also want to build out what is your clarity around your vision, your purpose. What are the things that the organization is really focusing on to drive growth? I'm going to tell you something. You've got to be so clear about what your goals are, and sometimes you have your vision, you have your purpose, strategically where you want to go, which that is in that, 0 to 5, and then that 5 to 10 year horizon. But you've got to build out those milestones of what you got to drive, and really what are your kind of what I call these kind of thematic goals. And your thematic goals through the year can change, but usually there are 5 or 6 big items that you're going to drive, and then you have buckets underneath there. So building out with your leadership team and your leadership community of where do we need to go and where do we need to drive and where do we need to focus? Because one of the most important things is creating that line of sight from the top of the organization to every employee in the organization of what are we focusing on, what are we going to drive, and how can you show up every day and have impact on the organization. So it really comes down to, creating that clarity. So one, it's about building a cohesive leadership team. Do you trust each other? Do you enjoy being together? Are you collaborative? How are you meeting and discussing? So cohesive leadership team. And I will share with you, I meet with my leadership team every day for 15 minutes for a lightning round in the morning. So every day for 15 minutes, I'm meeting with my leadership team. I'm doing a lightning round where we're talking about what are the key elements? Do we have to share with one another? What are we doing? Who's visiting? What are we managing? And we do that every day during the week. And then one day a week, we also have a 2 to 3 hour meeting where it's our weekly meeting where we're talking more about looking at where's the scorecard, the key metrics we're measuring, what are key elements, and the agendas are built spontaneously. So you do a lightning round in the meeting when you start. And if they have a topic they want to share more detail, we say put that on the agenda. So you do a lightning round, put that on the agenda, and then they get airtime to talk more and share. Now, you may have topics where someone tells everybody ahead of time, I want to talk about A, B, and C. that can happen, and you have those topics on the agenda. But sometimes something happens, right? And it's a burning platform. So you'll say, okay. And then amongst the team, we set the priorities of what first things we're going to talk through, right? Because, this is a burning platform. Has it affect X and Y happen? What decision do we need to take? And I do those in weekly meetings. And then also I do a strategic quarterly meeting where we do a day to 2 day session then where we're talking about big strategic items, the big items. How are we doing? How are we moving forward? And through the year, things get added on as you're going through market dynamics, the macroeconomics of what's going on in the market, the season, the weather. There are so many things that affect how we do business and what's going on. And so we do the strategic. So the daily huddle, 15 minutes, weekly meeting, and then the strategic meeting. So that's how you build that cohesive team. And you find is people talk more, you build greater camaraderie. Yeah. And you share more and you begin to learn about each other. And you begin to learn about people because then people get on the call early often and we chit chat a little bit before then we start the session. It's very, very interesting. Like football season is unbelievable. I mean, like people go and they'll be like, hey, did you watch the game? Blah, blah, blah. I mean, I'm in Kansas City. They'd be like, okay, like here, like last 2 weeks, people are like in Kansas City, like, oh my God, we don't win next week. We're dead. Well, thank goodness the Chiefs won because if not, my weekly meeting would have been a bad meeting today because there would have been a lot of people crying. But you know what I'm saying? So it's that personal part. You create the clarity. Why do we exist? How do we behave? What are those cultural traits? Why do we do what we do? So you create that vision, your mission, and what you're going to do. Talk about what's going to drive success in the organization. What's most important of what we're going to do. So you create that clarity. Then what you do when you have that clarity and you're also working with the levels below, right? You then begin to communicate. And I'm going to tell you something. Communication is really essential. And when I mean communicate, it's like called over communication. You have to tell people something 7 times usually today in today's world for them to get it. And why is that? Why do you think that, Nicole, as a communication person? What do you think?
Well, I think people hear what they want to hear and then go back to the other way of doing things, right? Like, this is easier. I know how to get this done. Unless you provide that accountability, then they're not going to go the direction that you want them to. And I think people are just going to test it too, especially if it's change, right? Like, do I really have to do this?
Absolutely. But I agree with everything you said. Also, people today are way too distracted.
Agreed. And there's a lot of information coming at us from all different directions.
Absolutely. Bombarded. We are bombarded today with information, and one of the things I talk to my team about is being present. Where I am, like I've been up this morning. I've read a few mails. I got a lot going on, but I'm with you. I'm present. I'm focused on what we're doing. So when you're in that meeting on that topic, be present, be focused, because people are so bombarded. So really over communication, even thinking about how one communicates messages is also important because there's been a lot of science around communications that I would say 30 years ago, 20 years ago. I mean, today we know there's people that are visual learners. Something drives me nuts is slides. I love slides, but I hate slides that it's like, hello, just put the key point on the slide so they remember the very key 3 messages or 4 messages. And then we're going to we're going to do the, voiceover to the message, right? I hate when you got to read 1,000 slides. So once again, smart slides with a message, because there are those people that need, and you know what? And I'll tell you another thing. I believe this, pictures help. Like if the slide has something that's, impactful or relevant to the topic, that helps. I know that sounds crazy. It's the way our brains process, right? You also have people that have to hear it. And I often tell people when I'm telling them something important, bloody pick up a pen, people, and write down what I'm saying. Because writing down something actually helps you remember it. Okay, that's another thing. Do you know how many people do you know that take notes on their computer?
I know a lot. I don't do it because I find the old fashioned pen and paper here much more
Right,
effective. Yep.
right. So I am just like you, an old fashioned pen and paper girl, or I bought one of these Remarkables.
Ooh, do you like it? I used to use my iPad and I would write on my iPad. Mhm.
And I like this because I can file stuff in one area, right? And you can write just like, and I guess they got this new cool colored one that I haven't gone out and bought yet. So I still use paper and pen. Like, right now I'm doing budget sessions. And for the budget sessions, I'm writing notes. And then I put those with, the slides and things and the financials to remind myself of things. So I do a mixture of both. But I do think, so I'll be like, people, let's pick up a pen. Let's write this down because I'm going to tell you a couple important points. Once again, overcreating clarity. It's about repetition, simplicity, multiple mediums. That's my message to you. And also ensuring about cascading and messaging. And this is another thing. I like to build things for my leadership community. I'm going to say, here is a deck, here's some messaging, and I need you to cascade this. So I want you to talk about this to your people, give this to your team members, and let them cascade this down in their meeting. So you're actually making the job easier for your leaders to cascade all the way down through the organization, if that makes sense.
It absolutely does. I think what you're talking about in terms of communicating things multiple ways, not expecting that if you've communicated change via email that everyone has seen it and now on board. But I think what you just talked about too, Jackie, can help for communicating up as well. Of like, hey, if I'm trying to cascade something up to leadership, let's make sure I've got it in slide deck form. Let's make sure I've had the conversations. Let's make sure I sent it via email too, because I think that communication road needs to work effectively both ways.
And then another thing to help reinforce clarity, we were talking about, because what we're talking about is transformation or change, right? Is also then I like to build change communities.
Ooh, say more about that. What's a change community?
Well, so I like to get pulses from the organization. So I create these communities that get feedback from the organization. And those change communities then feedback up. And then I'm getting also feedback from them real time, periodically about what's going on, what's hitting the mark, what's not, whatever. Because I do think, too, going back to your point about I want to give feedback, I want to, share my perspective. Once again, if you have people out in the organization, and often you can do it via your sites or you can do cross functional, you have to look at your organization, think about how you set it up, and every organization is different. If you're doing like a global business and global change versus, regional or local change, but a change community is very, very powerful. And really good books on that are like John Cotter. John Cotter has the 8 principles of change, right? That are I really do like Cotter. There are different types of change leadership out there, and I'm really dating myself because I'm old school. But there's some great books Cotter's written. Well done, positive reinforcement and change. He also wrote a book. I'm like, the name's escaping me, about teaching people. It's about penguins. Once again, it's a fable, and teaching them how to fish. Their food went away, and teaching them how to fish. That is very interesting. I actually did a meeting once where I had my leadership come out in penguin costumes and dance. It was at that time a happy feet. There's a lot of those good books. And I got to tell you, those fable books, you mentioned it, like any book that's a fable that somebody can read 90, 100 pages, 120, and then read it on a plane, and it's interesting and is really good, right? Because it helps people think through, what do you got to go through when you manage change. So also building out change communities, transformation communities, to help give you that two-way communication is also very important.
How do you pick who's in a change community? And do you internally even call it a change community? Let's say I work on Jackie's team over here on, I don't know, I'm in the lab or something. How do I get picked to be on a change community?
Well, usually, it's great that you say that. I ask for feedback, but it's also a form of talent development too. If people volunteer, I'll say to people, is somebody interested in volunteering? But then there are some people that will tap on the shoulder. It can be a good element of their own career management and talent development to work in those communities. It's an opportunity for them to cross functionally collaborate. So they're in one department and this is a cross functional. So let's say you have 4 different business units and you want to get a perspective of maybe you're changing how you do your innovation processes in an organization. So bringing a cross functional, cross collaborative scientific group together across businesses to talk about what they're seeing, what's being discussed. That helps them grow, also helps them build a network because in your career development, it's important to build networks outside of where you work and things like that. So it can be through volunteerism. It can also be mindful through opportunity for development. So talking through that as a leadership team.
I love that. Thanks for sharing. Okay, Jackie, well, I could keep asking you questions I feel like all day, but I know we got to wrap up here soon. So I want to move into our rapid fire segment. So just answer these questions as quick as you can. Let's say one sentence or less. What's one business red flag that you see far too often?
A lack of focus and clarity.
If you had to describe your leadership philosophy in 3 words, what would it be?
Service before self.
Love that. What is one opportunity you see on the horizon for agriculture that excites you most?
I've been in this industry for 35 plus years. And, what I'm excited about is throughout my career and even today, the impact on innovation and technology allows our industry to evolve. And why that is important is because we are the most essential business in the world. We feed the world. We have an impact on people's health and we have an overall impact on society. And that's what excites me. And that's why I've been in this industry my entire career.
Yeah, absolutely. Love that. What is one thing you think every company should do tomorrow to boost organizational health?
I think that people, to boost organizational health, they need to show their organization and their people how much they care. Because until you show people how much they care, they won't care.
What is one piece of advice that you wish you could go back and tell younger Jackie?
You know what I would tell younger Jackie? It's interesting, but as you age, you become more self confident and self assured. And I have. And I would tell younger Jackie to not always be afraid or to be unsure of oneself. I think that's something in my career I've evolved. Today, I'm extremely probably too self confident, but it's like, oh, well, what the heck? 60 years old, it's like I say, I got something to say it. So I do share my kernels of wisdom. Some people might not think it's wisdom, so I think probably in my career, sometimes I probably played things a little too smart. I was maybe a little too careful at times. So that's one of the things that I always say, to people is, be self confident, be out there, be yourself, bring what you got to the table. And I did that, but I wish that when I was 28 or 27, I was the woman I am today. Boy, that would have been scary, but that's another discussion for another day, Nicole.
I love that. Thank you so much, Jackie. I think for anyone who's listening to hear where you've been in your career and then that advice to your younger self, just I think can help people feel not alone in their leadership journey, that like we all experience fear and anxiety and unsureness of ourselves. So I really appreciate that piece of advice. Okay, and last but not least, at AFA we love hot takes. So, bold, unconventional opinions, maybe even controversial opinions. What is an unconventional or bold opinion? What's your hot take about leadership or the future of agriculture?
Well, I would say the following: a future of agriculture, and this is what I would just say: we all have to be really smart and pay attention For all the good we do, we're a very misunderstood industry. And there is a lot of agendas out there that talk about our industry, I think often with half information. So, one of the greatest things that we have to be loud and proud, and we have to stand up for our industry. So, the greatest thing we can do is be advocates and go out there and have our voice and share and talk about all the good we do, because there's a lot of people out there that also talk about a lot of the things that we do that, like, I mean, we're a highly regulated industry between the EPA, the FDA, we're talking about food, feed, fiber, and fuel. So there's a lot of misconceptions. So it's easy to point fingers at us, but we have to point the fingers back and be the greatest advocates for the best industry in the world, which we all work for.
Love it, Jackie. Thank you. Okay, so at AFA, we're all about building bridges, and thank you so much for sharing all of your wisdom with us. Where can people connect with you or learn more about what PBI Gordon is doing?
Yeah, so they can connect with me on LinkedIn. And also, PBI Gordon also has a website and LinkedIn. Each one are PBI Gordon Corp or our Pegasus PRN PharmaCal or our Pet Ag also have distinct websites to talk about each one of our industries. So thank you for asking. I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Jackie. I could keep talking to you forever. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom. This has been a fascinating conversation. I feel like every time we get to the one of these ends of these episodes, I'm always like, this is my favorite one. So thank you for making time for us and our listeners in your incredibly busy schedule. Really appreciate it, Jackie.
Well, thank you, Nicole. It's a real blessing. I've been involved with AFA through the years, and your organization and many similar ones out there like it that I'm involved in. It's really important. Your organizations are making a difference. You're helping young leaders and the future leaders of our industry be better, and you're making a difference every day. So thank you and AFA for all you're doing.
Thanks for your partnership and helping make it possible. Really appreciate you joining us on the Cultivating Leaders podcast. Thanks for listening to the Cultivating Leaders podcast brought to you by Agriculture Future of America. If you've been here before, you know we value feedback as a gift. Please leave us a review and let us know how we're doing.